Tonight, you travel quietly back in time, not to witness the clash of bronze shields beneath a blazing sun, not to stand in the center of a crowded agora while voices rise in debate and sandals scrape against heated stone, but to arrive gently at the hour when the day has already ended, when the wide square of ancient Greece has emptied of merchants and philosophers, and when the air has cooled enough to carry the scent of stone, olive oil, and distant sea salt without effort. You stand at the edge of the agora as evening settles fully into night, and the marble columns that once reflected sunlight now hold the pale glow of the moon, their shadows stretching long and quiet across the open square, while wooden stalls sit closed and covered, woven awnings hanging loose and unmoving in the still air, as though the market itself has folded its hands and lowered its head to rest. A single oil lamp burns beside one of the columns, its flame wavering gently in the breeze that drifts down from the higher streets, casting soft patterns of light that tremble across carved stone and fade again into darkness. And nearby, an overturned basket rests where figs were once piled high, now empty and waiting for morning without urgency or expectation. You begin to walk across the wide stone floor of the agora, your steps slow and unhurried, and the sound of your movement seems to dissolve almost immediately into the open air, as though the night itself absorbs anything that might disturb its calm. And as you cross the square, you notice how the silence feels complete rather than empty, how it carries the memory of the day without needing to repeat it. Before leaving the open square entirely, you pause beside one of the great marble columns and rest your hand lightly against its cool surface, feeling how the stone still carries the memory of sunlight from earlier hours, and how centuries of passing hands have worn its edges smooth. And for a moment you simply stand there beneath the quiet sky, aware that even this vast and public place has softened into something intimate and still. At the far end of the square, a narrow street descends between whitewashed walls toward the lower district, and you follow it without thinking, passing doorways where heavy wooden shutters have been drawn tight, and small lamps glow faintly behind thin fabric curtains before fading one by one as families prepare for sleep. The final murmur of conversation drifting softly into the street before settling into stillness. From an upper balcony comes the faint scrape of a stool being moved across stone, followed by the gentle knock of a jug being placed carefully on a table, and then the quiet breath of a lamp being extinguished, leaving only moonlight to rest across the interior walls beyond. And as these small sounds fade, the street grows softer still, wrapped in layers of calm that seem to deepen with every passing moment. You continue walking without purpose, without destination, and without needing to arrive anywhere at all, noticing how the smooth stones beneath your feet hold the last trace of warmth from the day before surrendering it fully to the cool night air, and how the pale surfaces of the buildings reflect moonlight in tones so gentle that no shadow feels sharp or sudden. A stray cat slips quietly across your path and disappears into a narrow alleyway, its movement so silent that it feels almost imagined. And above you, woven cloth hangs from a balcony rail, unmoving in the stillness, while somewhere deeper within a home you hear the faint sound of someone turning upon a woven mat before settling again into rest. Further down the street, a small shrine is set into the wall, where a clay lamp flickers before a carved figure worn smooth by years of devotion, and its flame bends slightly in the breeze before rising upright again, casting long and patient shadows that stretch like slow breathing across the stone. And even here the quiet feels complete, as though reverence itself has grown still for the night. As you move farther from the open square of the agora, the streets narrow and curve gently, and the city that once echoed with argument and laughter now seems to fold inward upon itself, surrendering fully to darkness and rest, while the distant sound of the sea against harbour rocks drifts faintly through the air, softened by distance and by the simple passage of time. With each step you take, your thoughts grow slower, guided not by urgency, but by rhythm, by the soft pattern of sandals against stone, and by the cool breath of night air slipping between the walls. until even the idea of time begins to feel unnecessary, and the ancient city around you becomes nothing more than a quiet presence guiding you gently towards sleep. The street continues downward in a slow and patient slope, the stones beneath your feet growing smoother where countless steps have passed before you, and the walls on either side rising higher and closer together, holding the coolness of night like quiet guardians of the homes they shelter. A narrow doorway stands slightly open ahead, and through the small gap you glimpse the soft glow of a low-burning oil lamp, where an elderly woman sits on a woven stool, carefully folding a length of cloth with slow and practiced hands. Her movements steady and unhurried, as though the act itself is a gentle ritual that marks the end of the day. She steps the folded cloth aside, lifts the lamp to adjust its wick, and then lowers the flame just enough that the room falls into a softer shade of amber before she rises and closes the door, leaving the street once again wrapped in moonlight and silence. You continue walking without hurry, noticing how faint threads of conversation drift from behind shuttered windows, quiet words exchanged between parents and children before sleep, the tone calm and low, never rising above the gentle rhythm of the night air moving between buildings. Above you, a wooden balcony creaks softly as its beams cool, and a curtain stirs once in a passing breeze before settling again, while the scent of baked bread lingers faintly from a bakery further down the road, its ovens now dark but still warm from the day's work. You pass the bakery's doorway, where flour dust still marks the threshold, and inside, a young apprentice brushes the last traces of white powder from a wooden table with slow, repeated strokes, preparing the surface for morning before extinguishing the final lamp and stepping into the small room behind, where his master already rests upon a mat near the back wall. The door closes gently, and with it the faint scent of grain and yeast is drawn inward, leaving only cool night air to settle across the street. Further along, two night watchmen walk at an unhurried pace toward you, their sandals brushing softly against stone, their spears resting loosely in their hands as they speak in low voices about nothing urgent or important, sharing the calm hours together while the rest of the city drifts deeper into sleep. As they pass, one glances briefly upward toward the rooftops, where moonlight rests upon clay tiles, then nods once to his companion before continuing around the bend, their voices fading slowly until they are absorbed completely by the stillness. The road narrows again, and a small courtyard opens unexpectedly between two homes, where a clay basin sits filled with water, reflecting the moon above, its surface unbroken except for the faint ripple caused by a single falling leaf. Beside the basin, a father kneels quietly, rinsing dust from his hands after a long day's labor, the sound of water cupped and poured echoing softly against the courtyard walls before dissolving into silence. And when he finishes, he lifts the basin and carries it inside, closing the wooden door behind him with careful hands. You linger for a moment in the courtyard's gentle light, noticing how the moon paints pale shapes across the walls, and how the air here feels cooler and deeper, protected from the open square you left behind. As you return to the descending road, the distant scent of salt grows slightly stronger, carried on a breeze that slips through the narrow corridors of the city, suggesting the harbour not far ahead, though still hidden beyond the winding turns of stone. A loose shutter taps once against its frame before settling again, and from within one home comes the faint sound of someone shifting on a woven mat before becoming still. Reminders that life continues quietly behind every wall, even as the streets surrender themselves entirely to rest. You walk without destination, without urgency, and without the need to arrive anywhere at all, feeling how each step draws you farther from the brightness of the agora and deeper into the softer, more intimate rhythm of the sleeping city. The lamps now stand farther apart, their golden pools of light separated by longer stretches of gentle darkness, and you notice how the darkness feels welcoming rather than empty, as though it carries the quiet breath of hundreds of resting lives behind closed doors. Ahead, the road begins to open slightly, and you sense the harbor drawing nearer, not with noise or movement, but with the quiet promise of water reflecting moonlight beyond the final curve of stone. The road widens gradually as you step beyond the last cluster of tightly pressed homes, and the scent of salt grows clearer in the air, mingling softly with the fading warmth of stone, until the harbor reveals itself before you in a quiet stretch of silver light beneath the moon. Fishing boats rest along the water's edge, their wooden hulls rocking gently against worn posts, ropes creaking in a slow and patient rhythm that blends seamlessly into the hush of dark water, while the surface of the sea holds the reflection of the moon without ripple or urgency. You move closer to the harbor wall, placing your hand against its cool surface, and for a moment, you simply listen to the steady lap of water against stone, the sound repeating softly and without variation, like a breath that neither quickens nor slows. A single lantern burns at the end of the pier, its glow faint but steady, casting a thin line of gold across the wooden planks. While farther out, a small vessel drifts slightly at anchor, its mast silhouetted against the pale sky. Near the edge of the dock, a fisherman tightens the final knot of the evening, before stepping back from his boat, brushing salt from his hands and pausing to look out across the quiet water, as though measuring the stillness of the night before allowing himself to rest. After a moment, he lifts the lanterns from its hook and lowers the flame just slightly, leaving enough light to mark the pier's edge, but not enough to disturb the darkness that surrounds it. Then turns and disappears slowly into the narrow path that leads back toward the city. You remain by the harbor wall, noticing how the air feels cooler here, how each breath seems deeper and slower, guided by the rhythm of water touching stone in an unbroken pattern that has repeated itself for centuries. The moonlight spreads across the sea in long, soft lines, and even the faint movement of distant waves feels subdued, as though the entire coastline has entered into a shared and peaceful agreement to remain still until morning. A rope shifts gently against a wooden post, tapping once before growing quiet again, and somewhere farther down the dock, you hear the faint rustle of fabric as a sail is folded and secured for the night, each small sound drifting briefly into awareness before dissolving completely into silence. You walk slowly along the harbor's edge, your steps softer now, matching the rhythm of the water and the subtle sway of the boats, and you notice how your thoughts have grown lighter with each passing moment, as though the concerns you carried with you have slipped quietly into the sea and been carried away beyond the horizon. Beyond the last pier, the shoreline curves gently toward darker cliffs where no lanterns burn and no voices remain, only the faint shimmer of moonlight resting upon the water's surface. And for a moment you allow your gaze to follow that pale reflection outward, not toward any destination, but simply toward distance itself. After lingering beside the harbor, you begin to turn back toward the inner streets, leaving behind the steady breath of the sea, though its rhythm seems to remain within you, continuing quietly beneath your thoughts, even as the stone roads rise again toward the sleeping city. The scent of salt fades gradually as you retrace your steps, replaced once more by the familiar tones of oil, clay, and cooling brick, and the harbor's silver glow slips gently behind the curve of the buildings, leaving only soft moonlight guiding the way forward. With each step away from the water, the city feels calmer still, as though the harbor has washed the final traces of motion from your mind, and you carry its quiet rhythm with you as you return toward the higher streets where lamps now burn even lower than before. As you leave the harbor behind and follow the rising road back toward the higher streets, the rhythm of the water lingers quietly within you, like a memory that does not need to be held on to in order to remain present. And with each slow step, the cool breath of the sea fades gently into the warmer scent of stone and olive wood that belongs to the inner city. The houses here stand closer together, their whitewashed walls glowing softly beneath the moon. And most windows are now dark, though in one upper room a final lamp still burns low as someone finishes a last small task before sleep. the shadow of a hand moving slowly across the wall before the flame is lowered and disappears into darkness. You pass beneath a narrow arch where the stone holds the night air in a deeper shade of coolness, and your footsteps echo briefly before softening again as the street curves upward toward the agora you crossed earlier, now even quieter than before. A lone figure sits outside a modest home near the top of the slope, not in debate or instruction, but simply resting after the day's work, turning a small clay cup slowly between his hands as though feeling its shape for the first time. And after a moment, he sets it beside the doorway, rises without haste, and steps inside, drawing the wooden door closed with a quiet and careful motion that blends into the stillness. Further along, a small shrine set into the wall holds a lamp whose flame has burned almost to its end, the wick glowing softly before dimming into a faint red thread of light. And as it finally goes dark, the shadows around it settle into a calm that feels complete and undisturbed. You enter the edge of the agora once more, and the wide stone square now seems even larger beneath the moon, the columns standing silent and pale against the night sky, their long shadows unmoving across the empty ground where earlier the day had been filled with voices and movement. There is no one here now, no argument to overhear, no market to cross, only the faint whisper of wind brushing past carved stone and slipping between the columns before moving on again. And for a moment you pause in the center of the square, aware of how the city has folded completely into itself, leaving behind only this gentle and steady quiet.
You notice how your breathing has slowed, how your thoughts no longer move with urgency or direction, but instead drift softly, like the light clouds passing across the face of the moon above. And you realize that you have not traveled through grand events tonight, but through the simple and ordinary rhythm of lives ending their day in peace. Doors were closed, lamps were lowered, water was poured into basins, and hands were rinsed clean of dust. Sandals were placed neatly beside thresholds.
And quiet words were spoken in rooms where families now rest. And in witnessing these small rituals, you have walked not through spectacle, but through stillness itself. A gentle breeze moves once more across the rooftops and into the open square, brushing past you before continuing toward the harbor you have left behind, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and oil and cooling brick, scents that seem older than memory and softer than thought. There is nowhere further to go now, no final corner to turn, and nothing left to observe except the calm that has settled comfortably around you. And so you allow yourself to remain exactly where you are, standing quietly beneath the pale glow of the moon, while the ancient city rests in complete and undisturbed silence. After a moment that feels both brief and unmeasured, you turn gently away from the square and let the image of white stone and darkened doorways fade slowly from your mind, carrying with you only the steady rhythm of night air and distant water. And as the streets of ancient Greece dissolve softly into darkness, you allow the quiet to guide you the rest of the way into sleep.